Hello.
Hi.
We're here to talk about some very cheery topics today. So I wanted to start out by talking about some similarities in the writing that you two have done. Margaret, you said that you conceived The Handmaid's Tale when you were thinking about it. You were thinking back to an America where women had very few rights, specifically the 17th century in New England. Lauren, your latest book happens to take place that very time. And so I wanted to start with you, Lauren, and ask a little bit about what interested you about that period in time.
Well, I had done some research when I was in an undergrad situation on early American captivity narratives by women, which are these wild survivalist texts that were actually used by preachers to justify colonization. And they're really interesting. They're interesting in and of themselves, but they're also interesting in a 21st century way because we see the sort of the vastness of time and the way that opinions have changed and the way that sort of the stories were told for a purpose. So I was interested in that, and then I was interested also in rethinking the way that humans and nature and God have been in conversation, maybe de-emphasizing the human aspect and trying to see what it would look like if my protagonist went through nature and started to lose civilization and nature sort of came up to be parallel to her so that she wasn't sort of at the top of the hierarchy, she was sort of equal to nature at the end. These are you know, it was an act of maybe decolonization over the course of the book.
Yeah, well, and that's so interesting. Literally backstage just now, we were talking about nature, and Margaret, I did not know that you were once a camp counselor that specifically focused on nature. And will you tell us a little bit about that? I just want the audience to also hear this.
This is, you know, before you were born. So 1958, I was hired to start the nature program at a small Reform Jewish summer camp in Canada. Why me? Because I was the only person that they could get their hands on who knew anything about nature. And one of my ex-campers said to me recently, I hated nature. Didn't want to go anywhere near it. But he is now the co-founder of a conservation program in Africa. So maybe some of it rubbed off. So I was promised that I would have a little lab built for me. That didn't happen. I ran my nature program out of a tool shed, and we went on from there. So yes, why me? Because I grew up with the biologists. I know their ways. I'm not afraid of snakes. Snakes, let's talk about snakes.
Wait, you have to tell them your nickname, which was Peggy Nature.
Yes, we were all called after our specialty. So there was Beck Arts and Crafts, Burl Horses, and I was Peggy Nature. Just the other day, I was waiting in a lobby, and a retired-looking man came up to me and said, "Are you Peggy Nature?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I was one of your campers." And I said, "Let me guess, you turned into a lawyer?" He said, "How did you know?"
So I'm curious, you both have written about, as we were talking about, both The Vaster Wilds and The Handmaid's Tale and other works of yours are stories about women in moments of survival. Those two particular novels don't take place in our contemporary times. What is it about drawing from historical knowledge of stories of women in survival that resonates with us today? I think, Margaret,
Well, I think it's partly a writer's problem, which is that present times are moving so quickly. It's hard to get a point of fixation. So as soon as you write about something in the present day, it's all changed, or some of it has. But I was interested in the 17th century Puritan New England partly because they're my folks. So I ought to say bad things about them, whereas there's other people that said bad things about them. Yes, but I know them. And I studied them as well before you were born, back in the early 60s with a man called Perry Miller, to whom the book is partly dedicated, who brought American studies into the academy. Him and another person called F.O. Matheson did that. Before that, nobody studied American literature and civilization, and especially not in the 17th century. They might have studied maybe Whitman, Moby Dick, but not the 17th century.
And Lauren, what appealed about it to you? I mean, you've also spoken about being put off by writing a book where Twitter and smartphones are.
Oh yeah, no, I wanted to talk about the modern age, but do it slant, right? And historical fiction is this amazing way to do that. You can speak metaphorically about the time that you're actually in. Every book is of the time that you're actually in, right? Even if you put it into the future, even if you put it into the past. But I was really interested in looking at the survivalist tale because they tend to be masculine, right? If you look at the Western is really like hyper masculine as a form. If you look at other survivalist tales, even Gary Paulson Hatchet or My Side of the Mountain, which are these things that I read obsessively as a girl, the person at the center is male, and I just wanted to flip that. I wanted to see what it would be like to have a female body in nature, responding to nature, and turning the idea of man versus nature into something maybe a little different, little more surreptitious, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of books that speak to our time, Margaret, I'm sure you're sick of telling us all I told you so.
Oh my God.
When it comes to the repeal of Roe and just sort of the assault on women's rights that has happened over the past several decades, really. Was it frustrating to have Handmaid's Tale dismissed as an impossible future for so long?
No, it wasn't dismissed everywhere. It had several reactions. One was in England, where they did their 17th century Puritan absolutism in the 17th century. I said that already. And they said, jolly good yarn. Margaret, you have such an imagination. Ho, ho. In the eastern part of in Canada, they asked nervously, could it happen here? Because they're always quite nervous. Canadians, and nervous people. Well, you can see why. To the north of them is Russia, to the south of them is the United States. You never know what they're going to do. In the States, one reaction was, don't be silly, we're the world's greatest liberal democracy, we would never do such a thing, never, never, never. And the other reaction coming from the West Coast was, how long have we got? So it was a split reaction. Yeah, so one of the theories is that civilizations can never start from zero. They always, even if they change the name, change the statues, change the flags, Tsarist Russia ended up with Stalin. And look what's happened now. Because they didn't have a tradition of liberal democracy at all. They had an absolutist state. China had an astonishing bureaucracy, and now it has an astonishing bureaucracy. The United States, but only part of it, because it's very diverse in its points of origin and its foundational beliefs. The part I was writing about began as a Puritan theocracy, gets thrown out, gets the, quotes, enlightenment, gets the revolution, but that theocracy is always underneath, waiting to reassert itself. So the question I ask myself is, if the United States were to become a totalitarianism, what kind of totalitarianism would it become? And we're beginning to see the answer to that. And some people can hardly wait to get rid of democracy and set up a Puritan theocracy.
So speaking of differing states and differing views and receptions to books. Lauren, you are imminently about to open a bookstore in Florida, and yay. I pulled this stat, and I'm sure you're much more versed in this than I am, but as of last September, 40% of the book restrictions in the US occurred in Florida. So you are focusing very much on the topic of banned books right now. So why did you feel it was important to open this store, and how is that a means of fighting back against book banning?
Yeah, so my husband and I are co-partners in this, and we've been watching this happen slowly. I mean, over the course of a few years. Talk about a Puritan theocracy. I mean, that's what Florida is right now. But we firmly believe in freedom of expression, and we were feeling frustrated about what to do about it. There's this amazing quote by the German poet Heinrich Heine, who wrote in 1829, I think, in places where people burn books, they will one day burn people. And I believe that is to be true, right? I think that banning books is the first step to burning them. And it's now a very, very swift slide into banning books. We have 1,000 more books challenged and banned in Florida than the next state, which is Texas. And it's increasing every single day. So, we wanted to be a lighthouse. We wanted to sort of spread freedom of expression. We wanted to stand in the middle. We are literally in the middle of the state in Gainesville, Florida, in the swamp. And we wanted to show that we're watching, right? We're here. The people whose voices are being erased, they matter. They need to see themselves in media. The state of Florida doesn't seem to value them, but we value them. We think that they're important, and they need to be heard, and they need to see themselves reflected in the books. So we're very passionate about this. We're a general interest bookstore, but we are going to be pushing these books. We're going to be trying to get them into the hands of as many people as possible. We're going to be inviting as many people who are comfortable coming to Florida to do talks. I don't know if Margaret Atwood would come, but you're invited. Thank you. So we have this whole banned book section, and The Handmaid's Tale is like some smack dab. I love it so much. So we're going to be trying very, very hard to at least start as a beacon and then let the light sort of shine into the other parts of Florida. But of course, thank you. We're not alone, right? Mitchell Kaplan at Books and Books and Judy Bloom also at Books and Books. We're working really hard together to make this sort of stand against book banning.
So when you say book banning, you mean schools and libraries?
Schools and libraries, but it's not just schools and libraries. There's an immense chill that's happening too. So we track the books that are actually actively being banned, but what we don't track is the teachers and the librarians who are terrified of putting books out. I have a friend who is a 5th grade teacher, and she used to teach the Holocaust by teaching Art Spiegelman's Mouse, a great book, and she does not feel comfortable putting that out because she is afraid that parents are going to come in and get her job.
Yeah, there's a naked mouse in it.
Well, I think it's more the Holocaust, but yeah.
And that was one of the objections.
Yeah, was that really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I thought it was history.
Well, it is, but if you add the word naked, then you've got an excuse.
It's true.
So there are naked SS men in here.
Yeah. Well, in a certain county in Florida, the dictionary was banned because it has the word sex in it, which is amazing. Right? Yeah, naked and sex.
Well, I've got some news for them.
The Bible.
They go on that way, they're going to be extinct because they won't be able to reproduce.
Oh, we all know that they have sex, right, these people.
They do?
They do.
Heretic.
In ways that come out in very public and embarrassing ways often.
So you need to do a list called Too Hot to Read.
Ooh, that's good. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I
have
love
a billboard, Too Hot to Read.
And the number one will be the Bible because of Song of Solomon.
No, not just that. There's so much murder and sex on rooftops.
Right? It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being Canadian of my generation, I know it well.
Yeah, same.
We never got those parts in school.
Ooh.
But we found them. Sex on the rooftop.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sex in the tents in the desert.
You want me to tell you which part?
Yeah.
I was going to wrap up about asking about the impact of books, but I think we've learned a little just now about the impact that books can have on our lives and our imaginations. But Margaret, The Handmaid's Tale especially has been central to protests around women's rights in the last several years, the imagery from it. And I'm curious, do you feel like the book has helped enact some change or at least some conversation?
Without a doubt. And I hear from people from various countries in the world. I will mention Argentina just to kick off. But every time you get one of these changes, you get a pushback against them. It's inevitable. The reason the imagery has been so widely deployed is that we live in an age of television, the internet, very visual, YouTube, all of these things, they're visual. If we were still in the age of radio, you wouldn't be seeing that phenomenon at all. It's because you can look at the image and make an instant connection. And this was kicked off in the United States in Texas. So some women were going to go into the legislative chamber where there were a lot of non-female people in dark suits enacting legislation about women's bodies, about which they appeared to know very little. And they wanted to do a protest, but they knew they would be kicked out if they were vocal or naked. So they decided to put on these outfits, and they ordered some long robes, red, which when they arrived were pink. This was not the message they wished to convey, so they made the red ones very quickly themselves. You can't be kicked out because you're silent, and you can't be expelled for immodest dress because you're very covered up. And the television camera sees you instantly. So I think that's why it became so useful in a lot of situations.
Definitely. Well, I wanted to thank you both so much for the work that you're doing to not only put incredibly moving and impactful stories out in the world, but help create real world change as well. So thank you so much for doing that and for joining us for this conversation today.
Thank you.